Hi, my name is Julia. I work on AI ethics at Circle. Today I would like to share with you something that makes me very excited every time I think about it, and that is the ethics of AI. So as you know from the title, today's topic is the main questions of the ethics of AI. But before we dive deeper into that, I wanted to actually pause a moment and talk about what ethics really is. A lot of us have heard the term, and I believe not so many people have a solid understanding what it actually means. So ethics is the science of basically studying what is right and wrong. Basically, the main question the branch of science asks is what is the right thing to do? And not in terms of like making profit or pleasing someone, but more like in the terms of deep down understanding of what feels right for me to do. Where does this understanding come from? Are humans the only species that actually have this feeling? These questions the ethics is trying to answer. Ethics has been around for many years, for thousands of years actually. And since nobody still have come up with a universal set of rules or a universal understanding of what is good or bad, there are actually multiple ethics. Perhaps you have heard about Kantian ethics. Immanuel Kant is a famous German philosopher who believed that humans have the highest value on earth and nobody has the right to disrespect them, only treat them with kindness and respect. We're going to talk more about him a bit later. At the same time, there is Christian ethics, and it is believed that every human is flawed, corrupted, and, has the so-called original sin in the Christian types of ethics. And only through loving God and making good deeds and striving to follow certain rules, we can hope to become better. Then there are different kinds of ethics. There are actually three main subfields of ethics. Normative ethics, which regulates behavior. It basically tells us what is right or wrong to do. For example, the golden rule is an example of normative ethics. If you've ever heard of it, it's just very simple. Treat others like you want to be treated, There is applied ethics. Applied ethics studies moral problems and dilemmas, and they often arise in personal, political life, social life. An example of applied ethics is whether euthanasia should be legalized, for example. Metaethics. Metaethics studies the theory of ethics, the ethics itself, defines the concepts, argues whether ethical knowledge is even possible, and so on. Moreover, there are ethics of science, ethics of business, ethics of journalism, basically like whatever branch you can imagine. And they describe how the representatives of these professions should act so that they do not have any moral resentments afterwards. One of these many ethics is the ethics of AI, the one that we are going to talk more about today. AI is something that we're all connected like very tightly today, tighter than we could ever imagine. So while Elon Musk is dreaming of a new generation of cyborgs and stuff, we are actually all connected to AI, not through brain interfaces like, again, Elon Musk's probably dreams, but through devices like smartphones. And I don't know about you, but I carry my phone with me pretty much all the time, and I know that a lot of people do that as well. So considering all this, and considering that AI is actually able to make sense of all our activities online, recommend us stuff, and make decisions for us even. For example, how often do you choose a TV series or a book based on an AI recommendation, like on Netflix or Goodreads or something? So, does part of the agency come from your AI assistant when you're making your decisions? It's an interesting point to think about. So, we don't want this assistant to be bad, right? When we accept recommendations from AI or use AI filters, we kind of assume that AI wants us good. We don't assume that it wants us to degrade or to finish us. And I think it's nice if the situation remains this way. So we're stepping into the era where more complicated AI devices becoming part of our daily life. For example, robots such as an Android prototype that was demonstrated by Tesla a year ago, or an intelligent taxi driver from Cyberpunk 2077 that is becoming more and more real. But since developers have to develop more and more complex systems, the responsibility for the systems is also growing. We could face such situations in games recently, such as Cyberpunk or Detroit Become Human, but would you like to face that in real life? How can we prevent creating a taxi that goes mad and decides to kill all the passengers, or morally suffering robot that has come to a self-realization in a world where androids do not have equal rights with humans? Every society lives by certain rules, and by this I don't just mean humans even, or animals, but also a certain time slice. For example, if you've read the Bible, which is the main book of Christianity and Christian ethics, that is recognized basically the most humane religion, it might shock you actually what you will find there. For example, the God from Old Testament made Abraham to kill his son to prove his loyalty. Today, this is not considered ethical behavior, but it was back then. At the same time, there are rules that are not written anywhere. No law prescribes you to help a lost 5-year-old or help an old lady cross the road, but you would still do it even if no one is looking, right? Because humans have moral values that police their behavior much better than laws or fear of judgment would ever do. And in fact, we are not the only ones. So for years, scientists believed that humans are the only species that have empathy, and they have conducted multiple experiments trying to cause animals show empathetic behavior and help each other, and didn't discover much altruism in the animal world. But then a man appears. His name is rather complicated. Franciscus Bernardus Maria Deval. And he didn't agree with that. He spent decades studying the social relationships of primates. He found out that in many cases animals actually do help each other, and the reason why it wasn't discovered before is just that animals didn't understand the complex experiment setups that were proposed to them. So when Deval and his research team came up with more animal-friendly experiments, they made many interesting discoveries. So elephants turned out to be capable of teamwork, and chimpanzees demonstrated great respect for private property. Other animals like dolphins and bonobos were also quite pro-social, all because selfish behavior doesn't adapt to the preventions of the species in the long run. Today, we live side by side with artificial intelligence. Even though the AI today is still not as intelligent and as androids from the games that we talked about, like Detroit Become Human and Cyberpunk, it still already actively participates in making very important decisions. For example, it was an AI algorithm that decided who is more worthy of medical help and supplies during the COVID-19 crisis. So if we let AI make such important decisions for us, we need to make sure that it's on our own side. Even when it's legally compliant, AI can still be harmful because it's not ethical. AI should inherit moral values from us, basically learn how to be a good guy or good entity at least. Artificial intelligence ethical field is being actively researched today. Among all the ethical and philosophical frameworks that AI ethics uses, there are two that prevail: utilitarianism and deontology. So what is utilitarianism? This is a philosophical approach to measuring the rightfulness of one's action that was formulated by Joseph Stuart Mill and Jeremy Bentham. In its base, there is a belief that all humans want to maximize pleasure and minimize pain. Therefore, a good action, something that is morally right to do, is something that gives pleasure to the most and greatest number of people and minimizes pain also for the most greatest number of people. However, by applying utilitarianism to real-life situations, we sometimes risk developing an AI program that is simply inhumane. For example, killing one person for the good of many is utilitarianism, but for many people it is still morally wrong. Deontology. What is it? It's an ethical theory that represents a set of clear rules where morality is defined as the degree to which somebody follows these rules. We talked about Christianity example before. That is an example of deontology, where someone's morality is measured by whether they follow 10 Commandments or not. Deontology is also often associated with Immanuel Kant, since he believed that because every person has the ability to reason from nature, they have inherent dignity, and therefore it is immoral to violate or disrespect this dignity. For example, we shouldn't treat a person as merely a means to an end, using them. The majority of ethicists today think that deontology has a great potential when we are talking about the development of ethical AI systems. We can encode rules in their programs, and that will guarantee that AI will always be on our side. But still, the consequences of closely following rules can also still be quite unpredictable. It is very hard to make rules that for sure won't make all the universe go into paper clips. That is why it's also impossible not to mention Isaac Asimov, who is a sci-fi writer, I'm sure you know. He proposed 3 laws of robotics, which guide the moral actions of machines in his Robot series, which was released in 1940s. So the rules say, a robot may not injure a human being or through inaction allow a human being to come to harm. A robot must obey the orders given to it by human beings except where such orders would conflict with the first law. And a robot must protect its own existence as long as such protection does not conflict with the first or second laws. So even though a lot of time has passed, not a lot of AI researchers have formulated better rules for the AI behavior. So it is believed today that Isaac Asimov's rules encompass the core principles of ethics of AI that all developers should respect. And I would like to talk about the problems that AI ethicists often face, starting from fairness and bias. So when we're talking about problems concerning AI algorithms, fairness and bias are among the first ones that come to mind. We already said that we want to treat all people equally. First of all, because, well, like Immanuel Kant, we believe that all humans deserve respect and dignity. Secondly, because fairness is fundamental to having a stable society. When a gender or ethnic minority feels discriminated against, it creates distress and unease in the society. AI is slowly becoming one of the social institutions, so the majority of people expect their social institutions to be fair, or at least striving to be fair. The thing with fairness is, however, that it is very complicated. How do you define fairness in a set of concrete rules so that an algorithm could understand? Bias is an obstacle to achieving fairness. When we are talking about humans, by cognitive bias we usually mean some partiality about a thing, or event, or a group of people. The danger of bias is that usually people aren't aware of it. To them, it just feels like common sense. Computers can also be biased. Sometimes it's because of the algorithmic logic encoded by the people who were biased, but more often AI has prejudice against a group of people because of the anomaly in data. For example, Amazon's hiring system discarded women's CVs, not because developers didn't want them hired, but simply because historically few women filled into the technical roles. Another common problem is transparency. So imagine you build a facial recognition system for the metro that automatically identifies and catches criminals. It was working fine, matching passengers with the faces of demanded criminals until one day it made a mistake. And then again and then again. So you had to retain several innocent people and invite a team of developers to fix bugs in the system that caused it to fail. But with AI, it's not always possible to tell why a system made a mistake. Facial recognition systems, for example, are usually based on neural network and work by the so-called black box principle. You feed some data to it and ask to search for patterns, but what rules will it learn for itself is almost impossible to predict. And more importantly, you can't open it and see, what happened. For example, AI computer vision that is used to diagnose an illness can provide a more frequent positive diagnosis for photos that were taken in a medical office. If a person is already in the medical office, there is a high probability that they're sick. But quite obviously, being the doctor's office doesn't cause people to actually become sick. This lack of visibility is a problem when these systems are used to make decisions that influence people's lives. A developer team can literally spend years until they find what went wrong. Moreover, there is a moral issue involved. Not only does a patient deserve to know their diagnosis, but also be informed based on what a doctor decided on this diagnosis. Imagine a situation. Family members of a critical patient get informed that their relative is being switched off from the life support system. They ask whether it's necessary, maybe something can still be done. Receive an answer, we don't know actually. Our AI system told us to do that. Or think of a risk assessment system. If you're in a trial, you would probably like to know for sure that you aren't given a more severe punishment just based on your skin color. This leads us to the next problem that AI often has, which is accountability. Machines today make mistakes, and most likely they will continue making them in the future. But who bears the responsibility for these mistakes? For example, it's unclear who is accountable for a self-driving car accident, the car manufacturer or the owner or the algorithm itself. In AI ethics, responsibility is understood in 3 dimensions. Which people or groups of people are accountable for the impact of algorithms or AI? How can society use and develop AI in a way that is legally and morally acceptable? What moral and legal responsibility should we demand from the AI system itself? Responsibility can be legal, but it can also be moral. Legal responsibility describes events and circumstances when legal punishment must take place. The actor is responsible for an action when their guilt is proven by the law enforcement institutions. Moral responsibility and legal responsibility aren't always the same thing. In philosophy, moral responsibility is the ability to decide what actions deserve praise. This inner responsibility is inner status. While norms that exist in the society might influence it, every person decides for themselves what value they consider to morally binding. But is AI capable of this? So, as you probably have noticed, the ethics of AI asks more questions that it can answer, but it's okay. Somebody has to point out the weaker points so that the whole situation becomes better. What do you think? How can we enhance trust in AI systems and guarantee that the machines make better decisions in the first place? Leave us a comment and we would be glad to read it. I hope you found this lecture fascinating. Leave us a thumbs up to let us know that we are doing a great job and follow us. If you have any further questions, please don't be afraid to ask them in the comments. Thank you.